The Dancing Dragon. This is a story told by the Yao people in the mountains of southern China. Long, long ago, high up in the misty mountains, lived a little girl who loved to dress in red from head to toe. So, in the village, she became known as Little Red. Soon, even her mother Pan was calling her that too. One day, while they were working barefoot in the rice paddies, a fierce gust of wind swept across the field. Looking up, they saw big black clouds blowing towards them. "Quick! We must get indoors!" cried Pan, grabbing Little Red's hand and hurrying toward the village. The wind grew stronger, and a boom of thunder echoed across the valley. Fat raindrops pelted their backs. With a sudden scream, Pan saw a huge, dark storm dragon hidden inside the clouds. It was hard to make out, but a flash of white teeth gave it away. Just then the clouds parted and the dragon lunged forwards, its claws drawn. Pan tried to shield Little Red, but she was no match for the dragon, who simply plucked Little Red from her mother's arms and leaped back into the sky. As the dragon disappeared into the swirling clouds, Pan heard Little Red call out, "I'll find a way home, I promise!" Pan stared helplessly at the sky. The clouds had all gone. Now the sky stretched out before her, empty of everything but a couple of birds, darting around in the evening light. Little Red and the dragon had vanished. There was nothing Pan could do. She stumbled down the path back to the village, blinded by her tears and a few strands of hair, which had been loosened by the wind. All at once she was yanked back. Her hair had caught in the grasping branches of a bayberry tree. She twisted and turned, struggling to get free. "Help!" she shouted. Mid-yell, a plump red bayberry dropped right into her open mouth. Shocked, she bit into it. A sweet juice tingled on her tongue, then ran down her throat, and a strange feeling of calmness settled over her. Carefully, she untangled her hair from the tree's branches and made her way back to the village. "Where's Little Red?" called a friend. By the time she had finished telling her story, a group had gathered around her. "You look exhausted," said her friend. "Let's get you to bed. We can't fight a storm dragon." The others agreed, shaking their heads. "We just have to hope Little Red does find her way home," they murmured. Half carrying, half supporting her, they put Pan to bed, where she slept solidly for 7 days and 7 nights. At the end of the week, to everyone's shock, she gave birth to a baby boy. His cheeks were so round and red, she decided to call him Bayberry. Bayberry was sweet and cuddly, and he never ever cried. But the most surprising thing about him was how fast he grew. Every day he was taller than the day before. By the end of the week, he was as tall as a 12-year-old boy. If this seemed strange to Pan, she didn't let it show. She spent every minute she could with him, telling him stories and teaching him all she knew. One day, Bayberry was sitting outside under a tree when he overheard 2 crows talking to one another. "Poor Little Red," said one. "Yes, poor Little Red," replied the other. "She's being held prisoner by that horrible dragon, and Bayberry doesn't even care." "What do you mean?" Bayberry looked curiously at them. "Who's Little Red?" "He doesn't even know," said the first crow. "Did you hear that?" "Well, boy, you really know nothing at all," said the second crow sadly, shaking its head. And with that, the crows flapped their wings and flew off into the sky. Bayberry watched them go with a bewildered look on his face and went inside. "Who's Little Red?" he asked his mother, "and why were the crows telling me about her?" "Come and sit down," said Pan quietly, and then, "Little Red is your sister." "How is that possible?" Bayberry leaped to his feet. "I don't have a sister. It's just me and you." "Oh, Bayberry, you do have a sister," Pan wept, and she told him about the day Little Red was snatched by the storm dragon. "Why didn't you tell me about her?" demanded Bayberry. "I have to find her and rescue her." "That's exactly why I didn't tell you," Pan said. "I've already lost one child to that dragon. I couldn't bear to lose another." "But don't you see? Now that I know about her, I can just stay here. She could be suffering." "Bayberry, no," begged Pan. I have to, Bayberry insisted, and I'd rather leave with your blessing. Oh, Bayberry, Pan sighed, but it was clear that his mind was made up. Please, please be careful. Come back to me safe and sound. The next morning, Bayberry kissed his mother goodbye and left with a small bag of food and a stick he had stripped from the tree in their back garden. He kept a smile on his face until he was out of the village. He didn't want anyone to see how nervous he felt. The path out of the village led up to a fork. To the left, the path wound up into the mountains. A storm looked as if it was brewing above their craggy peaks. To the right, the path snaked down into the lowlands. Bayberry turned left and started the long climb upwards. Soon, the village was just a small speck down below. He had been climbing for hours when he came across a huge boulder blocking his path. It looked as if it had been sitting there for a very long time. On one side of the boulder, there was a sheer drop. On the other side, the craggy mountain face towered above him. Can't give up now, he muttered to himself, feeling slightly dizzy as he looked at the sharp drop. He tried to wedge his stick under the rock to force the rock aside. After jabbing it as hard as he could, the stick snapped in two. The rock hadn't moved an inch. He bent down and pushed at the mossy rock with all his might. Again, nothing happened. He tried again, and this time the boulder shifted a little. Grunting and panting, he kept pushing until at last, with one final heave, it slipped over the edge. Clinging to the side of the mountain, he watched the rock bounce and roll down the mountainside, finally smashing into 1,000 pieces. To Bayberry's surprise, where the rock had been, a golden flute lay glinting in the sun. Bayberry tried to play it. As he blew, dancing his fingers over the holes, an enchanting melody filled the air. With a croak, a frog hopped out from under a leaf and bounced from one webbed foot to the other. A lizard that had been sunning itself on a rock started frantically jigging about. A trio of earthworms poked up through the ground and started to sway, and the faster Bayberry played, the faster the animals danced. Maybe this flute will prove to be more useful than my stick, he thought to himself with a smile. Popping the flute into his pocket, he continued his climb. After a couple more hours, the path became rockier. He was now as high as the lowest clouds, and it had turned icy. Bayberry shivered. Misty trails of clouds snaked around the rocks. This is just the kind of place a storm dragon might live, he thought. And sure enough, not long after that, he heard a monstrous roar. Diving behind a rock, he listened. "You're not digging fast enough," a voice screeched. "It's been weeks, and you still haven't finished my cave. I warn you, if it isn't finished by tonight, I am going to eat you up." Bayberry peered over the rock. A young girl in a red jacket, wielding a large pick, was desperately chipping away at a cave in the side of the mountain. It was his sister. He was sure of it. As he watched, an enormous dragon lashed out at her with its spiky tail. Without thinking, Bayberry ran from his hiding place. "That's my sister! Stop hurting her!" he shouted. "What's this?" The dragon turned to face Bayberry. "A small human dares to challenge my authority?" The fearsome monster loomed over him. Bayberry could smell its putrid breath. "This will teach you to threaten a dragon," it snorted, swiping its claws through the air. In a flash, Bayberry took out the golden flute and started to play. The dragon froze for a second, its claws inches from Bayberry's face. Then its shoulders twitched. It started jiggling its hips. A foot started tapping, and another joined in. "What's going on?" the dragon cried as it nodded its head to the lively music. "Stop playing that pipe. Stop it, I say. I hate dancing." Bayberry simply played faster. The dragon had no choice but to keep up. It spun around and around, squealing and getting dizzier by the second. Seizing the opportunity, Little Red darted around the dragon, skipping fast past its flailing tail and running over to where Bayberry was standing. "Please stop," the dragon howled as it hopped from foot to foot, waving its arms in the air. "I'll be kinder to your sister. She can have more time to finish the cave." Bayberry kept on playing. "Fine," groaned the dragon. "I promise to let you and your sister go if you only stop playing that dreadful music." The dragon sounded so desperate that Bayberry paused. "Ah, did you really think I'd keep my promise? You are a fool," the dragon cried, leaping towards them. Little Red swung her pick to defend them, while Bayberry hastily started playing his flute once more. "No!" the dragon wailed as its limbs shuddered and began to dance again. This time Bayberry turned around and walked back down the mountain, playing as he went. Trapped in the enchantment, the dragon had no choice but to follow Bayberry and Little Red, dancing in their footsteps. "You think you can take on a storm dragon with a measly little tune? I'll show you," it blustered. They had reached a lake. Bayberry waded in, forcing the dragon to follow him into the icy water. "Ugh, please, please, stop," the dragon begged. "I was only teasing before. I really will let you go this time." Bayberry ignored him and continued to play as fast as his fingers could move. Day turned to night, and still he played, watching the dragon splashing and dancing by the light of the moon. Who would give up first? Bayberry played on through the cold and dark, trying not to think about his aching fingers. The dragon tried to get away from the sound of Bayberry's flute as he moved further into the lake. The sun rose, and still Bayberry played on. So determined was he to defeat the dragon. Finally, after a whole day and a whole night of dancing, the dragon keeled over and sank to the bottom of the lake for good. Trembling with exhaustion, Bayberry and Little Red staggered back down the mountain. "I can't believe I'm free of that monster," gasped Little Red. "I wished every day that I had a sister or brother to rescue me, and here you are." As they neared the village, someone spotted them. "It's Bayberry and Little Red," she shouted, running to call their mother. Pan raced over, hugging them both tight. "You're safe," she murmured, and hugged them both tight. The next evening, the village celebrated the children's return with a feast. Little Red and Bayberry stood up and told everyone what had happened on the mountaintop. One villager couldn't believe his ears. But how did the pipe work? Surely it wasn't powerful enough to defeat a dragon. "Like this," Bayberry said, bringing the flute to his lips, and began to play. At once, everyone was dancing to the merry music. They twirled and whirled late into the night, laughing and rejoicing at the children's lucky escape. Even the stars in the night sky seemed to twinkle in time to the music. One by one, the villagers slowly drifted off to bed, until only Bayberry was left playing. For the flute's magical enchantment was only meant for the dragon. To humans, it was simply a golden flute played by an excellent piper. The end.